Technique 42, no warnings.
This is a perfect Monday joke. Why did the can crusher quit his job? Because it was so depressing. As a teacher, I almost always find that if I'm angry with my students, I have waited too long to address issues, or that I'm not using consequences consistently. Addressing issues before they become too big to handle is a really important aspect of classroom management. Using minor interventions and small consequences that you can administer fairly and without hesitation before a situation gets emotional or out of control is the key to maintaining control and earning students' respect. Relying on personal charm, emotion, or similar aspects of your relationships to get students to do what's expected of them risks missing the point. It's not about you. Students are not supposed to behave to please you. They're supposed to behave so they can better themselves, be the best people they can be, and get the most out of school. So your goal should be to take action, rather than to get angry. To do so, you should take action early. Try to see the favor that you're doing kids in catching off-task behavior early and using a minor intervention of consequence to prevent a major consequence later on. This is always a good thing. You should also act reliably. Be predictably consistent, sufficient to take the variable of how you will react out of the equation, and focus students on the action that precipitated your response. So you don't want to lose focus. You want to make sure that you're delivering your consequences consistently. And lastly, you should act proportionately. Start small when the misbehavior is small, and don't go nuclear unless the situation is nuclear. Release steam when it builds up in you. Make sure that you are not addressing the next student with the previous student's anger. The behavior that most often gets in the way of taking action is a warning. Giving a warning is not taking action. It is threatening that you might take an action, and therefore it's counterproductive. We either do or don't do. Warnings send a message to students that a certain amount of disobedience will not only be tolerated, but is expected. Teachers in effect say, it's okay once, but if you do it twice, I'm going to start getting annoyed. But the third time around, well then you're at a limit. If you do this, you should expect students to take full advantage of their 2 free passes. If your expectations and rules are deliberately ignored and you don't take action, with an intervention that corrects it or a consequence, they are neither expectations nor rules. Now, I'm not saying that you must use a consequence every time students fail to meet your expectations. It's also fine to offer a general reminder to all students about common expectations. Make sure that when they begin to slide, you prop them back up. Students who are trying in good faith deserve the benefit of the doubt and can be corrected using management techniques, not consequences. There are times when a consequence is going to be better than a management technique. Once you've determined that a behavior is the result of disobedience rather than incompetence, that is deliberate, and deliberate action must be met with deliberate consequence. But the times when the behavior is not intentionally disobedient, a useful correction is also better than a warning, since it fixes the situation, and a warning merely discusses the outcome of further bad choices. So at all times, whenever possible, make sure that the correction or even the consequence is of use, that it explains the situation and explains how to make it better. When consequences are necessary, the key to delivering them is developing a scaled system of incrementally larger consequences so that you can deliver them reliably, fairly, and without hesitation. If you spend time planning your responses in advance, even mapping out a sequence, this will allow you to be consistent, which is the only way to extinguish behavior. So for example, first, you might have a student repeat an action more appropriately. Then require him or her to apologize. And then next, take away a small privilege. Then take away an entire privilege. And finally, make a phone call home. No matter what the consequences you decide upon, make sure you issue them following these 3 steps. Step 1. Be calm, poised, and impersonal, not angry or vindictive. Focus on the now. Show me your best from here on out, and then move on quickly. Step 2. Be incremental. When possible, take things away in pieces. Keep incentives in play if you can. If you go to your biggest consequence first, you have nowhere else to go from there. Step 3. Be private when you can and public when you must. If a behavior doesn't affect anyone else, deal with it privately. If a student has appeared to get away with something in front of the class needs to know there was accountability. They don't need all the details, but they do need to know that an action was taken. If you follow this technique and issue consequences in these ways, you will likely make the necessity of giving consequences more and more infrequent, which is, of course, the goal.